The sun burned softly over the streets of Accra, painting everything gold, but for Amma Mensa, the day felt cold and heavy. She stood on her family's porch, hands shaking, heart pounding so loud she could barely hear her mother's voice, until it rose, sharp as a blade. "You brought shame to this house. Pack your things." Amma's breath caught in her throat. "Mama, please," she cried, her eyes glistening. "He promised to marry me. I didn't mean." Before she could finish, her father, Kojo, stepped forward, his face tight with anger. "No daughter of mine will raise a bastard in this home. Leave before I lose my temper." The words hit her like stones. She tried to reach for her mother's hand, but Mama pulled away, her eyes cold and full of disappointment. Neighbors had started peeking from their windows. Someone whispered, "That's the girl who got herself pregnant." Shame burned through Amma's chest like fire. She looked down at her small belly and whispered, "I just wanted love." But love had vanished, leaving her alone on the doorstep where she had once played as a child. The heavy wooden door slammed behind her. That sound would echo in her mind for years. Amma stood in the quiet evening, clutching a worn bag and the faint flutter of life inside her. She walked into the night barefoot, tears mixing with dust, praying softly, "God, if everyone leaves me, please don't you leave me too." That night, a chapter closed, and another painful one began. The streets of Accra were alive that night, the sound of turtras honking, people laughing in the distance, music spilling from open bars. But for Amma, everything felt silent. Step hurt. Her feet were bare, her eyes swollen from crying, and her small bag hung loosely from her shoulder. The words from her parents kept echoing in her head. "You brought shame to this house." She had nowhere to go. The few friends she had avoided her now, afraid of gossip. Every time she passed a group of people, she heard whispers and soft laughter. "That's Kojo's daughter," someone murmured once. "The one who got pregnant." Amma kept walking, holding her belly protectively, wishing the ground could swallow her whole. By midnight she was weak and dizzy. She stopped near a quiet street where an old woman sat on a wooden stool, peeling plantains by the dim light of a kerosene lamp. The woman looked up, eyes sharp and kind at the same time. "Girl," she called out, "where you going with tears on your face and no shoes on your feet?" Amma froze, startled. Her voice trembled. I don't know. I have nowhere." The woman stood slowly, wiping her hands on her cloth wrapper. She said softly, studying Amma's face. "Come inside before the night swallows you." Too tired to argue, Amma followed her. The woman's little house was small, one room with cracked walls and the faint smell of wood smoke. A single candle flickered on a low table beside a pot of porridge. "Sit," the woman said, pouring some into a bowl. "Eat. You look like you haven't eaten in days." Amma hesitated. "I don't have money," she whispered. The woman waved her hand. "Who said anything about money? Eat." Amma lifted the bowl to her lips. The porridge was simple, just maize and water, but it tasted like home. Warmth filled her chest for the first time in days. After a while, the woman spread out a raffia mat in the corner. "You can sleep there tonight. My name is Mama Efua. And you?" "Amma," she said quietly. "Amma Mensa." Mama Efua smiled, showing the lines that years had carved into her face. "Amma. Strong name. Don't worry, child. You may not have parents now, but God didn't forget you." Those words broke something inside Amma. Tears rolled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She tried to speak, but no words came. All she could do was cry, deep, shaking sobs that had been buried since the moment her mother shut the door. Mama Efua didn't ask questions. She just sat beside her, humming softly, rubbing her back the way a mother would. "Cry, my child," she whispered. "Let it out. Tomorrow will find you stronger." That night, Amma lay on the mat staring at the wooden ceiling. The house was quiet except for the sound of crickets and the steady rhythm of Mama Efua's breathing. Amma placed her hand on her belly and whispered, "I'll protect you, little one." Somehow, for the first time since being thrown out, she felt a small flicker of peace, fragile but real. As dawn crept through the window, she could smell the sweet scent of porridge again. Mama Efua was already awake, stirring the pot. "Come, Amma," she said with a smile. Eat, then we'll see what the day brings. Amma sat quietly, watching the steam rise from the bowl. She didn't know what her future held, but she knew one thing: kindness still existed in the world. And sometimes it came from strangers who had nothing yet gave everything. That morning in that tiny room, Amma's broken heart began to heal, not through miracles or money, but through the simple grace of a woman who saw her not as shame, but as a child worth saving. The months rolled by slowly, each day blending into the next. Life wasn't easy for Amma, but she had learned to survive. Every morning before the sun rose, she tied her headscarf, lifted her small charcoal stove, and carried a basket of corn to the roadside. There, she roasted corn and sold it to travelers and workers passing by. The smoke stung her eyes, the heat burned her hands, but it was the only way to earn a few sadies. Her belly grew rounder with each passing week. Sometimes, when she bent to turn the corn, she had to stop to catch her breath. Still she kept working. When she earned enough for a small meal, she would smile faintly and whisper, "We did well today, little one." But not everyone was kind. Some people passing by would whisper and laugh. "That's the girl who got herself pregnant," one woman said loudly. "Her parents threw her out." Another added, "Such a shame, so young and already ruined." Amma heard every word, but she kept her eyes on the corn, pretending not to care. Inside, though, each comment cut deep. Sometimes, when business was slow, she'd rest her hands on her belly and talk softly to her unborn baby. "They don't know you," she'd say. "They don't know how much you mean to me." Those quiet conversations kept her going when everything else felt heavy. Through it all, Mama Efua was her only support. The old woman helped her count her earnings, saved a small amount for her, and made sure she ate well. "You must stay strong, Amma," she would say. "That child inside you deserves a mother who doesn't give up." One rainy night, as thunder rolled through the sky, Amma felt a sudden sharp pain shoot through her stomach. The pain grew stronger, coming in waves. She dropped the bowl of roasted corn she had been cleaning and gasped. "Mama Efua," she cried out. "It's time." Mama Efua rushed to her side, calm but firm. "Breathe, my child. Lie down." She boiled water, tore clean cloth, and prayed under her breath. Amma screamed as the contractions grew closer together. Sweat drenched her body. She grabbed Mama Efua's hand and sobbed, "I can't do it. It hurts too much." But Mama Efua held her firmly. "Listen to me, Amma. You are stronger than their judgment. Push, my child. Push." Amma gathered all her strength, tears streaming down her face, and pushed one last time. Then suddenly a cry. A loud, beautiful, trembling cry that filled the small room. Mama Efua lifted the tiny baby and smiled through her own tears. "It's a boy," she said softly. "A strong one." Amma could barely speak, but when Mama Efua placed the baby in her arms, her whole world changed. She stared at the little face. Eyes shut, fists clenched, skin soft and perfect. "My Kwesi," she whispered. "My little miracle." She kissed his forehead and cried, not from pain this time, but from pure love. "No matter what happens," she said softly, "I'll give you a better life. You'll never feel the shame I felt." Outside, the rain poured harder, washing away the ashes from the roasting stand. Inside, the old room glowed faintly from the lantern light. Mama Efua smiled, wiping Amma's forehead. "The world may have turned its back on you," she said, "but tonight, heaven opened its arms." Amma held her baby closer, rocking him gently. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel lost. She felt chosen. Chosen to love, chosen to rise, chosen to prove that even from the dust, something beautiful could be born. A year passed, and little Kwesi was growing fast. A chubby, bright-eyed boy who laughed every time Amma sang to him. He had her smile, her nose, and her stubbornness. Every morning, she tied him to her back with a faded cloth and went to the market. The money she earned from roasting corn barely covered food and rent, but whenever Kwesi smiled, all her worries seemed smaller. Still, Amma's heart carried one quiet wish, that her parents could see him. She wanted them to know that despite everything, she had survived. She hoped maybe, just maybe, seeing their grandson would soften their hearts. One Sunday morning, she dressed Quasi in a clean white romper and wrapped herself in her best Kent cloth. Her hands trembled as she tied her headscarf. "We're going home, my baby," she whispered. "Maybe today they'll forgive us." The walk to her parents' house felt endless. Every street held memories. The mango tree she used to climb, the little store where she'd buy sweets after school, the church bells that once meant family dinners and laughter. By the time she reached the familiar wooden gate, her legs felt weak. She hesitated, then knocked softly. Her mother opened the door. For a moment, their eyes met. Alma's filled with hope, her mother's with surprise that quickly turned cold. "What are you doing here?" she asked sharply. Alma's voice trembled. "Mama, this is Quasi, your grandson." She lifted the baby gently, hoping the sight of his innocent face would melt the ice between them. "He looks like Papa, doesn't he?" But her mother didn't even look at the child. She turned her face away, folding her arms tightly. "You should not have come back here, Alma." Before Alma could speak again, her father appeared behind her mother. His expression was hard, unreadable. "Didn't I tell you never to return?" he said coldly. "We have no daughter who disgraced this family. Go." Alma's throat tightened. "Papa, please," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "I've changed. I'm working now. I just wanted you to meet him. He deserves to know his family." Her father's tone didn't soften. "Leave before the neighbors see you standing here. We have nothing to say to you." The words cut deeper than she expected. She looked from her father to her mother, hoping for a flicker of mercy. But there was only silence. Only rejection. Alma turned to leave, her baby starting to fuss in her arms. As she walked down the path, something caught her eye through the open window. Her younger sister, Afia, twirling in front of the mirror, wearing Alma's old yellow dress. The same one Alma had sewn by hand before everything fell apart. Afia laughed, radiant and carefree, as if Alma had never existed. Alma stopped for a moment, her chest tightening. The laughter that once filled their home now belonged to someone else. She blinked back tears, whispering to herself, "So easily replaced." She walked out the gate and didn't look back. Her feet felt heavier with every step, but deep inside, something fierce began to grow. Not hatred, but determination. As the wind brushed against her face, she whispered to her sleeping child, "One day, they'll remember my name. Not because I begged them to, but because I made something of myself." That day, Alma's hope died, but her fire was born. Years passed, and the fire inside Alma never went out. Life was still hard, but she refused to give up. Every morning before the sun rose, she tied her hair with a faded scarf, kissed little Quasi on the forehead, and headed to the market. Her job was simple but exhausting, sweeping the stalls, scrubbing the concrete floors, and collecting trash before the vendors arrived. By the time the sun climbed high, her back ached and her hands smelled of soap and dust. When the market closed, she would rush home, cook a small meal for Quasi, leave him in Mama Efua's care, and then change into her bar uniform, a black skirt and a plain blouse. The bar was noisy and full of laughter, smoke, and loud music. Drunk men shouted over each other, bottles clinked, and the air always smelled of beer and sweat. Alma smiled politely through it all, serving drinks until midnight. Sometimes she'd catch her reflection in the mirror behind the bar and whisper to herself, "Keep going. You're doing this for him." Quasi was her world. Even when she came home too tired to eat, one look at his sleeping face gave her strength. On her 28th birthday, Alma almost forgot the date. She was cleaning tables at the bar when one of the regular customers, a friendly man named Kweku, grinned and said, "Alma, you mean today's your birthday and you didn't tell anyone?" Alma laughed weakly. "Birthday. Please, I stopped counting those." Kweku shook his head, pulled a crumpled lottery ticket from his pocket, and handed it to her. "Here. My birthday gift to you. Maybe it'll change your luck." Alma chuckled. "Lottery. Oh, Kweku, I don't even have luck with transport fares." He winked. "That's what people say before they win." She took it just to be polite. "Thank you," she said, slipping the ticket into her apron. That night, when she came home, Mama Efua was waiting with a small bowl of rice and stew. "You forgot your own birthday again," the old woman teased gently. Alma smiled tiredly. There's no point celebrating when there's no money. Mama Efua handed her a cup of water and said softly, "Child, you must learn to believe again. Sometimes luck hides in foolish places." Amma laughed. "Mama, you always say things like that. Because they're true," Mama Efua replied, smiling. "Now eat before the food gets cold." Later that night, as Amma changed clothes, she found the lottery ticket still in her pocket. She looked at it and shook her head, amused. "If only life worked like this," she whispered. She walked over to her small wooden table, opened her Bible, and placed the ticket inside one of her favorite pages. Psalm 23. "The Lord is my shepherd," she read quietly. "Maybe one day he'll lead me somewhere better." Then she closed the Bible and blew out the candle. Days turned into weeks. Amma forgot all about the ticket. Life went on. The early mornings, the long shifts, the tired feet, and the little moments of joy with Kwesi. But something was changing deep inside her. She didn't know it yet, but this small act, slipping that piece of paper into her Bible, was the beginning of her turning point. While she struggled to survive, fate was quietly waiting for her. And soon it would knock on her door in a way she never imagined, proving that sometimes the smallest things we ignore end up rewriting our entire story. It was a bright Saturday morning when Amma decided to clean her little room. The past few weeks had been tough, her second job at the bar had slowed down, and she was behind on rent again. As she swept under her bed, she found her old Bible, covered in dust. She smiled faintly, wiping it clean with her cloth. "It's been a while," she whispered. When she opened it, something small and folded fell out. The lottery ticket. For a second she just stared at it, confused. Then she remembered the night Kweku gave it to her. She laughed softly to herself. "Ah, this foolish paper. Still here." She almost threw it away but paused. Something inside her said, "Check it." After feeding Kwesi and leaving him with Mama Efua, she walked to the small kiosk down the road, the one where people always gathered to check their numbers. The shopkeeper, a plump, cheerful man named Kojo Menz, greeted her. "Amma, you two play lotto now." He chuckled shyly. "Not really. Just want to check this old ticket. Maybe it's worth one sadie." Kojo took it, squinting at the faded ink. He typed the numbers into his machine, humming casually. But then he stopped. His face froze. He blinked, looked at her, then back at the screen. Amma frowned. "What? Did I win a small prize?" Kojo's voice came out shaky. "Madam, you won." She laughed. "Ah, stop joking. What did I win? 10 sadies." He swallowed hard. "No, all 6 numbers. The jackpot." Amma blinked, confused. "All 6. Kojo nodded quickly, hands trembling as he pulled out the printed results. "Look, same numbers. You won 12 million Ghanaian sadies. The world stopped. Amma stared at the paper, her mind blank. For a moment she thought it was a prank. 12 million Ghanaian sadies. That was more money than she could ever imagine. Her legs suddenly gave way, and she dropped to her knees right there in the shop. People around turned to look. Someone asked, "What's happening?" Kojo held up the ticket, eyes wide. "She's the winner. This woman won the national jackpot." Gasps filled the air. Some people clapped, others shouted. But Amma couldn't move. Tears filled her eyes. Her heart raced as her hands shook. "God, is this real?" she whispered. Kojo leaned over the counter and said softly, "It's real, Amma. You're a millionaire." Amma covered her mouth, sobbing. Her mind raced back through the years. The nights she went hungry, the insults, the shame, the tears, the prayers whispered in the dark. It all came rushing back. And in that moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, hope. She lifted her face toward the sky and whispered through her tears, "Mama Efua, your God is real." When she walked home, her legs still trembled. People she passed could see something glowing in her face, though they didn't know what had happened. When she reached her little house, Mama Efua was sitting outside peeling cassava. Amma dropped to her knees in front of her and cried, "Mama, he didn't forget me." The old woman looked up, startled. "What are you saying, child?" Amma showed her the ticket with shaking hands. "I won. Mama, I won." Mama Efua covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. Jesus. You see, didn't I tell you? Sometimes luck hides in foolish places. They hugged tightly, both crying and laughing at the same time. For the first time in her life, Alma didn't feel small, invisible, or ashamed. She felt seen by life, by grace, by God himself. That night she held Kwesi close, kissed his forehead and whispered, "Our miracle came, my son. The struggle is over." And outside, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if heaven was smiling right back at her. The news of Alma's win spread through Accra like wildfire. Everyone talked about the poor market woman who became a millionaire overnight. But for Alma, it didn't sink in right away. She still woke up early, still boiled water on her old stove, and still tied her wrapper the same way. It took days, maybe weeks, for her heart to believe that the struggle was truly over. When the money came through, Alma didn't rush to buy fancy clothes or cars like people expected. The first thing she did was take Mama Efua's hands and whisper, "We're moving." She bought a small, peaceful house in a quiet neighborhood with green trees, clean air, and space for Kwesi to play. The first morning there, Alma stood by the window, holding a cup of tea and smiling as she watched her son run around the garden, laughing freely. It was the sound she had prayed for on all those sleepless nights. A week later, she enrolled Kwesi in a private school, a place with bright classrooms, kind teachers, and shiny desks. On his first day, Alma stood outside the school gate for a long time, tears in her eyes. "You deserve this," she whispered. "Everything I couldn't have, you will." But Alma wasn't content to stop there. She wanted her blessing to mean something. She remembered all the women she had met during her hard years, the single mother selling oranges on the roadside, the young girls kicked out of their homes like she had been. She couldn't forget them. That's how Kwesi's Kitchen was born, a small food company named after her son. It started with just 3 women and 1 stove, cooking simple meals and packaging them for workers and schools. But Alma ran it with passion and discipline. "If I could survive hunger," she would say, "then I can build anything." Word spread quickly. People loved the food, but they loved Alma's story even more. She didn't hide where she came from. She told it openly. "Once I sold corn by the roadside," she said in an interview. "Now I sell dreams with flavor." Soon more women came knocking, asking for work. Widows, mothers, young girls who had been rejected by their families. Alma hired them all. "No one who's been broken should stay broken," she'd say. "We rise together." Within a year, Kwesi's Kitchen had grown into a well-known brand. Their meals were served in offices, schools, and events across Accra. Alma opened 2 more branches and started a scholarship fund for the children of her employees. Every Friday, she would gather her team, cook with them, laugh with them, and remind them that they were more than their pasts. Her story soon went viral. Social media was flooded with her pictures. Alma standing in front of her company logo, smiling proudly with the caption, "The woman who rose from the dust." People called her an inspiration. Journalists came for interviews. One newspaper headline read, "From street vendor to millionaire CEO, the miracle mother of Accra." Alma didn't see herself as a miracle though. Whenever she was asked how she did it, she always gave the same answer. "It wasn't luck. It was grace, hard work, and one old woman who believed in me when no one else did." At night, after long days at work, she would sit in her garden with Mama Efua and Kwesi. The air would be filled with the smell of stew and laughter. Looking up at the stars, Alma would smile softly and say, "See, Mama? God really didn't forget us." And every time Kwesi ran into her arms, calling her the best mama in the world, Alma knew the life she once begged for was finally hers. While Alma was building her new life brick by brick, everything on the other side was falling apart. Her parents' once proud home, the same one that echoed with her mother's harsh words and her father's shouting, had grown cold and empty. Kojo's business, the one he used to boast about, was drowning in debt. His partners pulled out, his trucks stopped running, and his workers left one by one. He tried to hide it at first, pretending everything was fine, but the truth came crashing down fast. The bank seized their land. The electricity was cut off. And soon, the house that once looked like a palace was up for auction. Alma's mother, Abina, couldn't handle the shame. The same woman who once looked down on everyone now found herself begging the neighbors for rice and salt. Every night she sat by the window muttering, "How did this happen? We did everything right." But deep down she knew, they had built their world on pride, not kindness. Amma's younger sister Esi didn't escape the storm either. Her wealthy fiancé, the one their parents had praised for years, vanished overnight, taking her dowry and all their savings with him. He left nothing behind except a short message that said, "It's over. Don't look for me." Sai cried for days. Her mother blamed the devil. Her father blamed the economy. But no one admitted what really broke them, their cruelty toward the daughter who once begged for love. Within months, everything was gone. The family that used to host grand dinners now ate one meal a day. Their fancy clothes were sold. Their car was taken away. When the auction notice was nailed to their front gate, Abina collapsed to the floor. Kojo didn't even have the strength to stop the officers when they came to clear the house. They watched strangers walk through their living room, pointing, whispering, taking pictures, as the auctioneer shouted bids. Abina's eyes filled with tears as a woman's voice called out the final offer. "Sold," the auctioneer announced. The woman smiled faintly and signed the papers. Her name on the document was Madame Mensa. Kojo frowned. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. He didn't know that behind that title, behind the calm, confident woman who had just bought their home, was the daughter they had thrown away. Amma didn't attend the auction herself. She sent her lawyer. But when she got the keys later, she drove there alone and parked outside for a long time. The house still looked the same, but it no longer hurt to see it. The pain had turned into something quieter, something like peace. Inside, the rooms were empty. Dust covered the floor where her childhood laughter once echoed. Amma walked through slowly, touching the walls, remembering the night she was kicked out with nothing but a small bag and her broken heart. Now she stood there as the new owner. Meanwhile, her parents, homeless and desperate, went from church to church, asking for help. One evening, Abina overheard two women at the market talking excitedly about a woman named Madame Mensa, the miracle mother, who had built a company called Kwesi's Kitchen and bought several properties in the city. "She's a blessing," one woman said. "They say she even bought that big house on Maple Road." Abina froze. Maple Road. That was their old house. Kojo and Abina looked at each other, hearts pounding. For the first time in years, hope flickered. Maybe this rich Madame Mensa could help them. Maybe she would show mercy. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that the woman they were about to beg for help, the one who now lived in their old home and fed hundreds of families, was the same daughter they had called a disgrace. And soon, fate would bring them face to face. The sun was setting when Kojo and Abina walked up the long driveway of the grand white mansion. Their clothes were faded, their shoes dusty, and their hearts heavy with shame. The house was bigger than anything they had ever owned, shining windows, tall gates, beautiful gardens. It was hard to believe that this was the same property they once called home. They stood there nervously as the guard opened the gate. We came to see Madame Mensa," Kojo said, his voice trembling slightly. The guard nodded politely. "Wait here." Moments later, the front door opened, and out stepped a woman in a soft blue dress, elegant and calm. Her walk was graceful, her face glowing in the warm light. But what caught their attention wasn't her clothes or her car parked beside the house. It was her eyes. Those eyes. Abina gasped and clutched her husband's arm. "Amma, is it really you?" Amma stopped at the top of the steps, holding little Kwesi's hand. He looked about 6 now. Tall, handsome, and full of life. He peeked curiously at the two strangers standing at the gate, not realizing they were his grandparents. Amma's gaze didn't waver. "You threw me out when I had nothing," she said softly. "Why come now?" Her mother's lips trembled. "Amma, please. We didn't know life would turn out this way. We made a mistake. We were angry, afraid of what people would say." Amma gave a sad, tired smile. "Yes, you cared more about what people said than what your daughter felt." Kojo stepped forward, his voice weak. "We're sorry, my child. Truly sorry. We were wrong. We've lost everything. We came only to ask for forgiveness, and maybe a little help to start again." Amma looked at them for a long moment, her eyes glistening. Behind her, the house glowed warmly, the home she had built with her own hard work, not with anyone's approval. She thought of the nights she went hungry, the tears she cried while carrying Kwesi alone, and the pain of being told she was nothing. But then she looked at Mama Efua's picture hanging just inside the hallway, the woman who had taken her in when no one else would. She remembered Mama Efua's words. Don't let pain turn you into the same kind of person who hurt you. Amma took a deep breath. I forgive you, she said quietly. But I can't forget. The scars may not show, but they're still here. She placed her hand over her heart. Abina began to cry. Amma, please, you're our daughter. We're your parents. Amma nodded slowly. Yes, and that will never change. But family is more than blood. It's love, and you stopped giving that a long time ago. Kwesi looked up at her. Mama, who are they? He asked softly. Amma hesitated, then crouched beside him. They're people who once hurt Mama very much, she said gently, brushing his hair back. But we've learned to forgive, haven't we? Kwesi nodded innocently. Yes, Mama. Forgive and be strong. Amma smiled faintly. That's right. She stood up and turned back to her parents. I'll arrange a place for you to stay. Not because you deserve it, but because I want to do what's right. But after that I need distance. I've worked too hard to heal to open old wounds again. Her father's eyes filled with tears. You're a better person than we ever were, he whispered. Amma looked at them one last time. No, she said softly. I just learned what love really means. From people who had nothing but still gave everything. Then she turned, held Kwesi's hand tightly, and walked back inside her home, her heart steady, her spirit unshaken, and her dignity shining brighter than ever. Months later, the grand hall was filled with soft lights, music, and the buzz of reporters. It was a charity gala, one of the biggest in the city, and all eyes were on the woman of the evening, Madame Amma Mensa. Her company, Kwesi's Kitchen, had become a household name, feeding thousands and creating jobs for struggling women. But tonight wasn't about business. It was about giving back. Amma walked onto the stage in a flowing golden dress, her son Kwesi holding her hand proudly. The crowd rose in applause. Cameras flashed as she stepped up to the microphone, her face calm but glowing with quiet pride. She looked around the room, then smiled. When I was younger, she began softly, people called me a disgrace. They said I had brought shame to my family, to my name. But, she paused, her eyes glistening, shame became my strength. The audience fell silent. Every word carried weight. Every pause spoke of the journey she had walked through fire to reach this moment. I learned something, Amma continued. Sometimes rejection is protection. Sometimes the pain you think will break you is actually planting the seed that will make you bloom. She gestured toward the screen behind her. Images appeared of smiling women and children at the shelters she now funded. These are the real heroes, she said. Young mothers who fight every day to give their children a better life. Tonight, I dedicate 3 million Ghanaian cedis to building more shelters for them, because no woman should ever feel alone the way I once did. The hall erupted in applause. Some stood cheering. Some wiped away tears. In the audience, her parents sat quietly at the back, their eyes wet with emotion. Abina held her husband's hand tightly as they watched their daughter, the same daughter they once cast aside, now standing tall and radiant before the whole nation. Amma smiled softly when she saw them. She didn't need their apology anymore. She had already healed. Just then, little Kwesi ran up and hugged her leg, grinning up at her. Mama, he said proudly. We made it. Amma bent down, kissed his forehead and whispered, Yes, my love. We did. The crowd rose to their feet, clapping and cheering as flashlights sparkled all around them. And in that moment, standing on that stage with her son in her arms, Amma knew she had turned her pain into power and her story into light.